Yes, welcome, Mr. Ögmundur Jónasson. It's a pleasure to have you here, an honor, really. I hope you also enjoy your time here. I'm going to do a little interview now with you. I have prepared some questions, and I would like you to answer the way that you would like to answer. So, the first question is, in your lecture, you addressed the issue of war crimes and war crime tribunals and the politics of justice. How do reconciliation methods and processes differ according to regions of the world, and then especially touching upon Latin America, Africa and Europe?
Well, when it comes to comparison of different parts of the world with regard to reconciliation processes, I am not in a position to give a detailed analysis, but on general trends internationally, I would like to say the following. In the wake of the Second World War, we saw high hopes and international organizations were created. We had the United Nations, and we had several conventions, the Convention on Genocide, for instance, created in 1948, ratified in 1951, but in effect they never came into use. They became dysfunctional from the very start due to the Cold War. We had the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. We later had Stalinist purges in the Soviet Union. We had tremendous atrocities committed in Cambodia, only to take a few examples, and nobody ever said nothing on the international arena. So all these high hopes that people had in the wake of the Second World War came to nothing for a long period. But now things are beginning to happen again after the close of the Cold War. And we have had criminal tribunals on Yugoslavia and on Rwanda, and there are some important signs of change. For example, with the principle of responsibility to protect, which emerges in the United Nations in 2005, and now we are trying, with help of institutions like the ICD, to make these principles codified by international law. And I think we should see our times as a period of transition, and so I have high hopes again that we are moving into a different period.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear. It's always nice to have a positive view upon the situation. As the Minister of Interior, how is Iceland and the Icelandic people recovering from the financial crisis that they experienced very recently?
Well, this crisis has been very serious. We, after the fall of the Icelandic banks and the entire financial sector in Iceland, we experienced a drastic fall in revenues of state and municipalities in Iceland, and we had to cope with that. In 2009, the year after the fall of the banks, we had a national deficit of 250 billion Icelandic crowns. Now it is down to 20 billion. How did we achieve this? Well, with a combination of hiring taxes and cutting down on public expenditure. And this has been very drastic, between 20 and 25% in real terms. And I have sometimes said that in Iceland we have a saying that when you get into into difficulties in turbulent seas, and you're on a boat. To get out of it, you have to take to the oars altogether. The precondition for doing that is that everybody is on the same boat. So our task, who are in government, is to put everybody on the same boat, and that society feels that we are conducting just policies. Now, it will all depend on how we succeed in doing this, but so far we have managed to create a consensus amongst the nation to take to the oars together and accept cuts and accept higher taxes. And we are succeeding, and I'm sure we will succeed, but it has been difficult and will be difficult for some years to come.
Thank you. Would you be so kind as to comment on the controversial case of the Icesave?
Well, Icesave has to do with banks, Icelandic banks operating abroad, particularly in the United States, no, in the United Kingdom and in Holland. And these banks were the first to fall. They fell with a little help from our friends, as the Beatles sang in the 1960s. And the friends were the British government, who took the largest Icelandic bank operating in Great Britain down by use of anti-terror law. Iceland was put on list with Al-Qaeda and North Korea, and we were excluded from the outside financial world, deprived of all possibilities of getting loans. We got the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, on a visit for 2-3 years. So we were under international supervision, so to speak. But we have in the aftermath been negotiating with the British and the Dutch government on Icesave. They wanted us to pay to them, these governments, all that was lost when the banks fell. But we have been resisting this. But now it is emerging that there were, after all, enough assets to pay all those who had been keeping their money with these banks. But this has created difficulties in relations with these nations, and we have had the European Union and the IMF on the other side, but this was referred to the Icelandic nation in a referendum, and everybody said no. And as I see it, it was a question of whether to protect human rights or property rights. When you have to cut down, what do you think of first? Guarding those who were losing their assets, or guarding those who were benefiting from our welfare system? Do you compensate somebody who loses his money in the bank, or do you help the one who is relying on hospitals or the welfare system in general? So it's a big political question which has reference to what is happening, not only in Iceland, but in Europe and the world in general. How do you prioritize in times of crisis? Do you prioritize in favor of human rights or property rights? I choose human rights.
Thank you. It's a difficult question indeed, and I guess that's up to you politicians to deal with those questions.
Well, the happy thing was that it was the nation which had to deal with it, because it was referred to the nation in a referendum, and that is something which is very unusual, and that is something which the international system was not too happy with, because they want negotiations of this kind between states to be kept outside the realm of general politics in the country and the decision making in society at large. So I think this is something to learn from, not only for Icelanders but for all of us.
Thank you. Could you tell us how your government is supporting the developments of arts and culture within your country as well as outside of Iceland?
Well, when we had to cut down expenditure of municipalities and the state, we had to cut everything down. We cut down in hospitals, we cut down in schools and universities and in the welfare system and everywhere, and also on our contributions to culture. But we have tried to spare culture, and I've sometimes said that if there is something you should do in times of crisis, you should try to spare culture. You should try to spare music and literature and stimulate growth in these areas. And I think it can be said that we have prioritized in favor of these fields. But that doesn't mean we haven't cut down. We have cut down on everything.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to add one more question, which is, how do you think that Iceland can use cultural diplomacy as a means of rebuilding its reputation globally after the financial crisis?
Well, by telling people what really happened, that you should not simply ask the representatives of power how we were behaving and how we are coming out of the crisis, but ask the people. Ask people if they feel we are following just policies, which I think, and I refer to my former answer, is the precondition of getting out of the crisis, that people really feel that we are taking to the oars commonly on the same boat. That will be the question we will be judged on.